All right, we are back with another session of how to deal with people. And today we're going to do an introduction to conflict management, kind of a brief overview to a couple of key concepts here to help us understand some of the other readings and videos you're going to see during this module. Now let's start with something basic, which is what is conflict management? Conflict management is the process by which we try to limit the negative aspects of conflict while increasing the positive aspects. And so this definition is kind of important because conflict in itself has a lot of negative aspects, and it tends to take on that negative connotation that we think a lot about, like things where we see gossiping and bickering and people just generally dissatisfied at the workplace, and that we are like engaging in unhealthy interpersonal relationships, that it just is a big distraction and really buries organizations in the sense of conflict, that just kind of takes over the sense of dread almost. But there's also positive aspects of conflict. Things like debating, coming to agree or coming to understanding that differences and values, under highlighting felt like flaws in processes or decision making, right? Is this kind of healthy back and forth where we conflict with each other in what we think and say, but we ultimately come to some type of positive agreement, and it makes us, or it leads us to better choices and better decisions, makes us stronger rather than weaker, right? So, in generally, when we think about conflict management, it's ultimately the process of trying to highlight those positive aspects, and stay away from and limit those negative aspects, but not wholly trying to just remove conflict, because ultimately we know that conflict is going to happen, right? If we don't have conflict, then we're likely to fall into things like groupthink, people being afraid to engage in conflict because they don't want to challenge what is kind of seen as the overarching social norms, right? So we don't want that. What we want to do is, when we engage in conflict, is to find a positive way to do it. So this also might be referred to either synonymously or almost like as a complementary terms, like things like dispute resolution, conflict resolution, mediation, other words like arbitration, even litigation, all come to the same type of this idea, right? Is how do we come up with a positive solution to a conflict between two or more parties? So, in general, how we'll frame some of the things that we're going to see through the rest of this module and thinking about how we go about conflict resolution is it relies on two key steps. The first is understanding the problem. What are the sources of this conflict? And typically, when we see it, there's kind of this superficial idea of a conflict, but then there's some of the deeper meanings behind it, some of the motivations of the people engaged in these things, how we understand like how they came to view the world in the way they did, how they came to view the specific situation the way they did, and how that has led to conflict. And so the first step in all of this is really trying to understand the problem and the sources of the conflict, what has led us to where we're at right now. The second step, of course, would then be solving the problem, coming up with some type of resolution that is fair, which is amicable, which is equitable between the sides, things that people can walk away with and go, okay, I feel confident that that was solved in a positive way, rather than walking away and going, no, like I don't like the way that ended, and continue to dwell on it over time. So coming up with good solutions to the problem is wholly reliant on that first part, which is ultimately understanding the sources of the conflict. And so the material that we're going to look at through the rest of topic one in this module is going to highlight a couple of different models of how we can both identify some of the problems, but also how we can solve some of those problems. And so the video that you're also going to watch is going to discuss some of the sources of conflicts, and some potential resolutions of those. So as we kind of think deeper about this, and then in topic two, we're actually going to do a video case study where you'll watch a mediation session between two neighbors that try to work this out, and you'll have to apply some of these skills to that. So again, I think a key step here is when it comes to conflict management, is for us to start thinking deeper about what it means, the sources of conflicts, and how we can solve them in meaningful, positive ways.